Greetings, seekers and life travelers, and welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod. I am your Life Mastery coach, and today we're going to be talking about relationship. Now, as you probably already know, we're all thrust into relationships right from the moment we are first born. And many of us go through our life taking most, if not all, of these relationships pretty much for granted because we don't really understand the nature and the power of our relationships. So in today's episode, you're going to develop a whole new appreciation for the concept of relationship and begin to see it for the sacred construct that it really is. That's because we're going to talk about the ultimate relationship. We'll discuss all of the following: the true nature of relationship, the purpose of relationship, the magic of awareness and intention, and creating the ultimate relationship. And to help me with this, I've invited a true relationship expert here to join me in my studio, as you can see. So I want you to meet my friend and colleague, Marie Wallace. Marie calls her husband of 24 years her LAF, L-A-F, lover, angel, and friend. Together, they intentionally create and build the relationship they adore and still get called newlyweds by so many people because of their curiosity, play, and genuine admiration for one another. Marie values people and learning and has spent a lifetime creating relationships that she truly values. She has more than 25 years of teaching, coaching, and facilitating experience working with couples, individuals, and groups. So please join me in welcoming Marie Wallace to the show today.
Thank you. I'm very honored to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. And I'm so glad to have you here in my home and in my studio. It's always, to me, much more wonderful having a live presentation where the two people are in the same room because we can interact with each other.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. And that's what we're talking about is relationship, which is interaction. That's part of it, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And so I guess the way I would start this is I would ask you, what does relationship mean to you? I know I've kind of summarized what you've told me for your bio, but tell me in your own words and from your heart, what a relationship means to you.
Well, that's a very good question. I think that relationship is a connection between people, animals, things. It's that how we are related and in connection with each other, right, and how we interact with spirit. I believe everything is connected and that we're all spirit and just how we relate to each other. Right. Which is using relate for relationship, but basically connection.
Well, and I like that you mentioned, the animals and the things and stuff, because they're part of what we're in relationship with. Mm-hmm. This is where the nature of relationship starts to come into play, because if you think about the absolute, that is all it is. If there weren't some concept of not all that is something that is not what me, there wouldn't be any concept of relationship at all.
Exactly.
And that's what makes a relationship so powerful and amazing. And in fact, I think a sacred space for all of us, because when I am in relationship with a person, with an animal, with my surroundings, with my environment, I am actually getting to experience myself as who I really am. Without all of that, I cannot do that. I need those things in order to be able to know myself as who I really am. So I think that's what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. And having that awareness. So you're talking about awareness too, because I can be in relationship and not experience me if I'm not aware.
Yes, of course. Well, awareness for me is the base camp of all life mastery.
It is.
You have to start with that. If you don't have any awareness, if you're just walking around sleepwalking, in total unconsciousness, you may or may not have right. You may or may not have an enjoyable or a series of enjoyable experiences. But one thing I do know is the more aware I am, the more enjoyable those experiences become, and the more I'm able to just take the juice out of everything and love it.
Yeah, I was thinking the word savor came up.
Savor.
You're savoring all the wonderful parts of life.
That is a good word. I like that word.
I like cooking words.
Well, and I'm sure you're going to tell us a little bit about recipes, aren't you?
Maybe.
Because you have a cookbook, don't you? Well, it's not really a cookbook, friends. It's a book. It has recipes, but the recipes aren't for things that you put into a pot or a pan. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's just a little bit about sizzling up and spicing up relationships and making them more quality. Yeah. Higher quality, more connection, being intentional about your relationship and leveling it up through intentional acts of play. It's really about play. The book's about play.
Yes, and I think play is a great word, isn't it? Because that's really what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
All of us, we're kind of playing. We're having an experiment.
This world's a big playground.
That's right, and it may not feel like play sometimes. I mean, some of your experiences may actually involve pain or discomfort or something like that. But after you've gone through that, once you've come out the other side, you can usually look back on the painful experiences and see what the gifts were in that, and begin to maybe even see them as a kind of play as well, a kind of experiment that you created for yourself.
Well, think about that roller coaster you may not like, if you want to continue the metaphor. Mm-hmm. Like you're holding on for dear life and you're going up this really steep thing and you're anticipating, it seems terrifying. And then when you get through the ride, for most of us, some people, I hate roller coasters. But for most of us, when you get to the end, you're going, that was terrifying. But there is so much to savor from it.
Well, this is one thing I talk about in my book, A Life to Die For. There's this thing called the peak experience. And peak experiences are not always positive experiences. They're not always experiences that you might look to actually do repeatedly or over and over again. But they are peak in the sense that they bring you into full presence in the moment with who you are and what you're doing. And so that's what you're talking about. When you get on that roller coaster and you feel that energy that you're not thinking about, geez, I forgot to mail my taxes. You're not thinking about stuff like that. You're not thinking about any of the pains of the past. You're right here, right now, during that ride. And that's a beautiful thing. And if you can bring that kind of awareness and presence into your relationships, all of them are going to be amazing too.
Which leads me to when you were talking about presence and being intense. And it's not always fun. So that's how we get to have a better relationship with ourselves. And that is those intense moments or in that darkness, that terrible shame, blame, guilt, and you're moving through it. I mean, it's very intense pain. But when you get out on the other side, just like you were saying, is that the gifts that you get from that you gain from that experience, as tragic and terrible as it was, helps push you through on the other side to where you can appreciate all the really great things that are happening in life too. But sometimes we don't want to go through that pain, and I get that, but sometimes, and accepting that pain and shame and guilt, because that's part of another side of us, which you talk a lot about in your book, the shadow side of things, right?
Right. Well, it's interesting that you should mention that, because what I've learned from myself is when I do have those painful experiences, whether it's in a relationship or whether it's something I'm doing on my own, I'm always in relationship, because I'm, for example, in relationship with the roller coaster as a very simple example. But when I'm having those relationships and experiencing whatever I'm experiencing, when it's all done, I get to look back and say, wow, I did that. I got through that. That means I can get through it if something like that ever shows up again. And it helps to build my confidence and my sense of just feeling more safe in my life, knowing that no matter what happens in the world, I'm always going to be okay.
It's like a callus, maybe, because you're building up that, I don't know, that's an interesting way. I don't know why that word came to me, but basically you're building that muscle of when you fall down, it's not as far, right? And And when you are up against something really tragic and difficult, you go, yeah, maybe it's armor, or we'll find another metaphor, but basically
you started it.
But I guess what I'm thinking of is at first it's just so difficult, and it feels like you've fallen this far, and next time you feel like you've fallen just a little bit and a little bit more. Not to say that it's a lot easier.
Yeah, that's
doesn't
right.
seem as difficult.
Right.
Which is the same about relationships, having those hard conversations.
Right. Yeah. And we're going to get to that.
I figured so.
Yeah. But I want to get back to your cookbook thing, because this is going to be something I want you to tell people how they can get a copy of that book before this show is over.
Okay.
And because I think it's a brilliant book. It's just an absolutely beautiful book. It's got so many amazing, I wish I had a copy of it here to show you. It's got these beautiful pictures in it, and then it's written up like recipes, and then all the action steps you have to take in order to accomplish a certain meal, although it's not necessarily a meal. And the whole goal of it is to help you. This is mostly for primary relationships. This is now where you're, in a relationship with a significant other, and you're trying to just keep it sizzling and happy and exciting and full of surprises. And so the book is really awesome. And what's the title of it again?
It's called The Romance Cookbook.
The Romance Cookbook.
Well, it started because Joe and I love playing, and we have dated all of our marriage, and wanting to keep this connected, and even little short bits of connection. So there's appetizers for those quick minutes that you have, and you have the entrees for maybe something that you want to be more intentional about and to really create an experience, and then the ooh la la section, of course. But the main idea and principle behind it is staying connected, and it is heart work too. It's something, all the dates in there are things that we've tried and we've had fun with and want to share with other people, because a lot of times you get in that relationship and you've been in it for a while, and then work happens and kids happen and life happens, and then you forget to stay connected. So that's kind of, and then it has communication and all those tried and true things that we've been through in relationships, and found that these help strengthen the relationship a lot more.
Right. Okay. So the Romance Cookbook, and where can people get it?
You can get it off of Amazon.com.
Amazon. You've heard of Amazon, right?
Or mariesgold.com.
Maries Gold, MariesGold.com. That's your website.
Yes, that's mine.
All right,
Thank you so much.
Amazon's not your website.
No.
I wish.
That would be a lovely one. Actually, it could be.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about, how we go through life, we have experiences, and we learn about ourselves. Why is relationships so important into that process?
Could you repeat the question? I think I got lost in somewhere. Okay.
So we have experiences in our lives.
Okay.
And I'm trying to pull out just the part that's about relationship.
Okay.
Now, I guess it's pretty hard for us to have relationships or have experiences that aren't in some way tied to relationship. But the importance of the relationship piece is, in my view, that we are interacting with something or someone.
Okay.
And so we get to see ourselves in relation to that other thing, whatever it is. That's how I see it. Does that make sense to you?
And so I think each relationship that we are in shows us a different aspect of ourselves.
That's a good point.
And going back to the playground, why not? Why not find out some more about myself and enjoy those parts of me, even those parts that I may not like? It's just becoming more whole. I believe it's part of our spirit as well, coming out and getting a chance to know ourselves in relationship with God or source, whatever people call that, spiritual connection to all that is, and learning.
But what about atheists? Atheists claim that there is no God or
but
higher
they
power.
are very spiritual. And,
Some of them are, I guess.
well, I actually know a couple of atheists, and they go, just because I don't believe in God doesn't mean I don't believe in spirituality.
Right.
And I don't understand the spiritual to the depth that they experience it, but I do understand that they know that there's something else to connect to that's at a more energetic. I don't know what the
Sure.
word would be
Yeah.
for that. What would you say?
Well, personally, I honestly don't believe there's any such thing as a non-believer in a higher power. I think we all have that connection on some level, at least if we are not strictly stuck in our heads. If we're stuck in our heads, then everything is about logic and sequential thinking and all the physical aspects and stuff. If we can get to the right side of our brain and look at the creativity and the more non-linear kinds of thought,
The miracles, just the miracles
Right.
that happen.
then we can see things in a different way. And I think that's where the concept of spirituality lies. So, and it's, the left side of the brain is tied with logic and all that kind of stuff. The right side of the brain is more tied with emotion, which now is bringing us back into our heart. So if we can have both of those, then we can tend to have relationship with spirit without really giving it a name. I mean, I have my own name for it, and you have your name for it, and each of us has our name for it. Many people in the world call this spirit God or Holy Spirit or something like that.
Or just alignment.
Yeah,
You can feel it when everything is in connection and working well, mind, body, spirit.
Right.
It's just alignment.
right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Some people call it that.
Right. Well, alignment is a state, I think, rather than a spirit. Spirit is more like an aspect of
I agree
humanity.
with that.
So I can see the relationship between those two words, but I think they're different.
I'm just wondering if an atheist would experience that feeling
Of alignment.
of alignment.
Oh, I see.
And maybe
Yeah,
relate
sure.
to spirit that way. It
yeah,
was just
maybe.
a connection.
Yeah. I don't want to pick on atheists, by the way. That's not what we're here to do.
No.
We're not here to pick on anybody, actually.
We're just exploring.
Exactly.
Hey, we got
We're
a
playing.
playground.
We're playing. That's what this is all
That
about.
is just exploring concepts.
So I've come to this idea that relationship has only one purpose. And first of all, this requires a little bit of thinking.
Okay.
Because if two people are involved in the relationship, then it may seem like I'm taking a selfish perspective. But if you think about it from both sides of the relationship, if I look at it from my perspective, the relationship is really all about giving me a place and an opportunity to experience and express myself as fully as possible. When I'm in relationship with you, the same is true for you also.
Exactly.
But I think one of the things that I teach people is I try to speak from what I call first-person self-responsible communication. So I try to speak only for myself. I try not to speak for people in general. Although I do know that I sometimes, in teaching, I use words like we and you and stuff like that. But when I'm describing an experience, I try to speak of it from my own side, which some people think, well, that's pretty selfish. All right, maybe it is. And yet, if we're all connected, if we're all one, then who am I really talking about?
And
It's-
I believe in that. You're just a different aspect.
Right. We're just different aspects of the same energy. We are one. I am you, you are me. And that's an amazing thing to understand. Although the concept of relationship kind of becomes a little fuzzy in that kind of structure, because if I am you and you are me, then what are we actually relating to? That's the question. And so I think that relationship exists in the human experience, well, in the physical experience anyway, because we have this illusion of separation. Because I can see myself as separate from you, I can now relate to you. Whereas if I see you as the same as me, as one with me, it's hard for me to relate to you. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, I do.
Now, I know it's complicated and I'm probably stretching the bounds of credibility here, but that's kind of how I see it.
I agree with you totally. It's just a way for us to experience this physical being and see again, back to the playground, but it's just learning about ourselves through a relationship and other relationships and just becoming a more whole being.
Right.
But also we are connected. So it's hard to take that out because we're all love and we're all aspects of the same, like you said, energy source. And so we're just seeing things from a different perspective.
That's right. Yeah, and seeing things. Now that's another good thing to say, because much of what we experience is related to our five senses.
Agreed.
And this is another error I think that we make in our lives, is we believe that just because I can't see it, taste it, touch it, feel it, or hear it, it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how we think, and that's what our ego minds want us to believe. And so in the thinking mind and the logical mind, it's easy to say, well, God doesn't exist because I can't see it, touch it, taste it, feel it, or hear it. And, well, okay, I can understand that you cannot, whatever. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I mean, we already know, for example, in science, that there are things that exist that we know we cannot see, and yet we can detect them using other methods. Mm-hmm. So, for example, there's certain frequencies of light that our eyes simply cannot detect. But that doesn't mean that there's not energy outside those ranges. There's things we can't hear because our ears are defined in a very narrow range of sound waves. Mm-hmm. But sound waves exist from all kinds of frequencies. Mm-hmm. And we know this. So if we can accept the fact that there is more to what we experience than what we see, hear, taste, smell, and feel, we can begin to expand and see the level of our expansion. I don't know where that all just came from.
Divinely downloaded. Anyway,
so I guess relationship then helps us to navigate the physical life, to know more about who we really are, and to connect back to that spiritual aspect that maybe we don't always connect to.
Yeah, because we're in the thick of things.
Right.
So that helps. Relationships help keep us present and aware, and that there is someone else, that there is something else out there. And so I think there's just so much. I think relationships are just like what you were talking about, light and sound and all of those. There are aspects of it that you can't even describe with words.
Right. Yeah, words are so limiting, aren't they?
They are. It's like, oh.
I want to tell you about this, but I don't know how. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just say, here's my experience. You try it. Uh-huh. Tell me what you think.
Just ways that I've experienced relationship that you can't put into words. And that's just when you take off all the mask and when you truly be who you are in the moment. You can't put that in words. And that's just being an accepting of both people in the relationship. If we're talking about human relationship, it's just being accepting of what is right here, right now. And there's so much beauty in it that you just can't describe it. Mm-hmm. But it's that art of allowing.
Right. I believe that every relationship that I get involved in is something that I, in some way, created for myself. Mm-hmm. Whether I did it consciously or unconsciously, or whether I did it in this physical world that we live in, or whether I planned it before I got here. Every relationship that I engage in has been planned in some way by me on a different plane in order to experience some aspect of myself. Mm-hmm. And that includes all the relationships that
really suck.
Yeah, that's right. That really sucked, or may have even been traumatic, may have caused me some severe pain. And I don't want to minimize for anyone who might be struggling in a painful relationship right now. I'm not trying to say that, you're not in pain or that you deserve what you got or anything like that. What I am saying is all of us are in our relationships for a reason. Mm-hmm. We have chosen to be in those relationships on some level in order to experience something that we have maybe not yet completely experienced.
Mm-hmm. I believe that totally. And I think that in those traumatic moments, some of our biggest gifts come from that. Because if we hadn't experienced some of those things, we wouldn't be where we are today and be as resilient as we are. But there was some aspect of ourselves that we were learning in that particular experience. So I think even some of the diseases that we have, I don't know if you believe that, but I know someone very near and dear to me who has Alzheimer's and has always been a very logical, sequential person. And I feel that this particular thing that's happening, and it's terrible and it's awful, but it's giving her heart a chance to speak. And because it hasn't had a voice yet. And I'm not saying that's okay, but it could be something that her spirit asked for to give her heart a chance to speak.
I think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And I resonate with that as well. I think we create, on some level, we create our own diseases. Now that might be hard for someone who's struggling with cancer or emphysema or something like that to believe that they created it themselves. But I look at my own life and I think of all the challenges that I've had. Sure, we've got an environment that has, pollution. And that pollution poisons our air and our water, and that has an impact on us. But think about this. On some level, I'm responsible for that pollution. Mm-hmm. Whether as an individual, I'm not necessarily the sole person responsible, but I am contributing by my lack of willingness to go out and fight against it, or by my, apathy about it, or, just sitting and watching TV rather than just zoning out. My contribution to the current system is based on how I'm showing up right now. And so even though I may not be directly responsible for that thing that's causing disease for myself and other people, I am responsible for my share of it.
Agreed.
And if I choose, I can shift my responsibility to do something more productive, more constructive, and I can help to relieve the problem rather than not doing anything, or in some other ways contributing directly to the problem.
We are a collective and we are connected.
That's right.
And we are all contributing. And I like the way that you said that. Either my activeness in it or my lack of doing anything about it. Right.
It's all choice. It all boils down to choice. And sometimes no choice at all has to be thought of as a choice. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm choosing not to do anything. Well, okay.
How's that working for you?
Yeah, exactly.
Or not.
Yeah. So, this is really great because we're talking about relationship now in all of the different aspects. We've talked a little bit about personal relationship, and maybe even touched on intimate relationship. We've talked about in relationship with our environment and with our, the world around us and how we choose to show up. All of these relationships are, again, expressions of who we are, of who we are deep down inside, not necessarily who we think we are. That, I think of myself as, yes, I'm an upstanding citizen, and I'm a law-abiding citizen, except when I'm not.
Except when you're not.
We all have ego mind versions of who we think we are. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's some aspect of those versions that's actually true. But the ultimate truth of who we really are is much, much deeper and much more amazing than just those limited little snippets. I am this, I am that, I am this other thing.
Yeah, those are just titles.
That's right. Titles, roles, thoughts, beliefs. Yeah. So anyway, wow, we were just kind of all over the place here today. This is really awesome. I like this. Now we want to talk a little bit about intention and awareness in relationship. Obviously, some of them are in difficult relationships, and maybe they believe that they can't get out of those relationships. How do we bring awareness and intention to that kind of conflict?
That's a great question. First of all, if you are aware that you are in a difficult relationship that you can't get out of, I always start with one or two things that I really value. I think value is, we stay in those relationships until the pain is too great and then we get out. That's the usual theory of it. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that you need a support system. I also believe you need to value that you are worth getting out of a relationship that is that difficult. It's also just knowing what you really, really, truly want. And if it's love and you're not getting that love, that's a very challenging question, because I'm trying to think of all the ways that I think just the pain gets so great and you feel that there's no way out, but knowing that there's always a possibility and there's always a way out is one thing that I'm kind of a Pollyanna that way. But even when things were at the height of the most difficult relationships that I've been in, it's been, you know what? I have to get out of this. I don't know how. I've done some pretty rash things, but it's like I have to. There's no other way out of it but to get out. But knowing a little bit more about who I am and what I value and what is important to get out of, right? It's still possible, maybe even to be in that difficult relationship and get what you want. But it's just intentionally being who I want to be every day, every minute, every hour. It's looking in that mirror and going, you know what? I like that person. Yeah. I love that person. And that's not quite where I wanted to go, but do you have something to add? No, it's just when you're in that relationship that's really difficult, it's hard to give yourself permission. I think that's really where we are at. And there's that whole cycle of abuse that we get involved in. And it's just kind of building yourself a border box. So when I know what I value, I can kind of know what my boundaries are. And then when those boundaries are crossed, see, this is a whole like deep subject here, but
we've got all day.
We've got all day. But honestly, if you know what your values are, it's easier to stand up for them and be able to fight for them. Whereas, because I've coached people who have had, I value that. So they see someone that they like and they align their values to what they
what that other person like,
what they like, what they value, mm-hmm. and they've removed themselves from that. And instead, just knowing what it is, even pick one thing that you really value, start from there. Maybe you really value a shower at 9:30 every Monday, hopefully more than that, but holding that back. But I mean, it's just whatever it is. I mean, shower sounds very small, but it's just those small steps that build us up to the bigger thing. Because some people are in that crippling relationship where they don't have anything that they have gotten to stand up for them. But if you're in a relationship where you feel like you're getting most of what you want, it's just a matter of prioritizing. I mean, I say I value my family, and then I'm busy in my job or things like that, and I'm not really intentionally making time for my family, making time mm-hmm. to be in that relationship, taking time to connect with those people, then I'm not really aligning my values with what I truly say that is important to me.
Right.
So you can.
So you're in a way, you're kind of out of integrity with yourself.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Out of integrity is a great way to put that, because I'm being wishy-washy, and it's back to I'm getting what I deserve.
Right.
Not deserve, but I'm getting what I created because I did nothing about my relationship. And I think that's probably, if I could give anybody any advice on relationships, it is to be intentional about connecting with them, learning as much as you can about yourself. And I think that would be the number one thing for those people in those difficult. Learn everything that you can about yourself, about relationships, constantly be learning and growing. And then pretty soon the answers are just come to you.
Right. Yeah,
going back to spirit.
Right. Absolutely. The higher power, just allowing that the higher power or your higher self, whichever way you want to look at it, that part of you that knows the truth about who you are and helps you to stay aligned with who you really are and why you're here.
Well, think about those moments that we were talking about earlier, where you're down on your knees and you feel that you are crushed to your smallest piece of yourself and that you don't even know if you really exist anymore. Mm-hmm. That's when we allow spirit to come through us, and all of a sudden we are starting to get the answers that we were looking for. But before, we had built this like armor up so that we didn't have connection with source or a higher power. And how can we have a better relationship if we are not connected?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, very nice. All right. So now that we've maybe brought more intention and awareness, obviously not all relationships are going to be challenged to the degree that we talked about. Maybe you've got a great relationship right now, and you can still bring more intention and awareness to your relationship. You can bring awareness to how you're showing up. You can bring awareness to how you may be judging your relationship partners about how they're showing up. Mm-hmm. And maybe when you judge somebody, what you're really doing is you're judging an aspect of yourself that you don't like so much that you haven't deeply looked at and decided to heal. So, raising awareness doesn't necessarily mean changing anything about the relationship. It just means becoming aware of what is. Mm-hmm. And then the intentionality piece, you say, well, now I know what is. I have to accept it for what it is. I can't really do anything until I accept it for what it is. Then I can set an intention for how it is I want to change it, or how I want to shift my
pattern interrupts.
Right. So all of those things have to come into play in order to create the kind of relationship you want. Now, that brings us to the topic of the ultimate relationship. What is the ultimate relationship? Who gets to decide anyway?
Well, I would say the individual gets to decide the ultimate relationship for themselves. But for me, the ultimate relationship is that loving communication and connection with another person. It is building that together, mm-hmm. right? And we're both working on the relationship, and we're both communicating in a way that we're, well, first of all, happiness is a state of being. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't fluctuate, like the temperature or anything, but we are intentionally working and building on our relationship all the time, daily, hourly. It's actively saying, you know what, I love this person and I will do what I need to, within reason. We all know that, but it's actively working on a relationship. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, we've both had those difficult relationships that we've broken out of. And someone said, well, how could I trust a coach that's been divorced twice? Well, because now I've been married 24 years. I think I might have learned one or two things, but it was constantly working on communication, having difficult conversations, and setting it up in a way that is loving and kind and respectful. I never attack the relationship, because if it's going to be an ultimate relationship, there's nothing I can't attack this relationship. It's not productive. It doesn't do anything but harm the relationship. So It's always, what can I do? What can I how can I actively work on this relationship? It's my responsibility, 100%. If my relationships are not working out, it's 100% my responsibility. And that's why I call myself the possibility girl, because if it's not working, I need to do something different.
Well, I was thinking of calling you Madam Metaphor, but that possibility girl works for me too. Now, okay, so let's just maybe try to unpack this a little bit. Okay. Let's talk about, since you're into cookbooks, let's talk about ingredients of an ultimate relationship. Now, I heard a few things there that I would like to to list off. One was connection.
Definitely.
So creating a connection with whoever it is you're in a relationship with. It. Now, we're not necessarily talking about an intimate relationship. It could be a relationship with your son or with your mother. Either way,
or your son's teacher.
Yeah, or somebody else. But the idea is you still want to have that heart connection, that the loving connection, where your intention all the time is to come to this relationship from a place of unconditional love and acceptance. And another word that I've heard a lot that I really like is unconditional positive regard for the other person. Recognizing that they're human beings just like we are, and they're going to make mistakes just like we do, and they're going to, do things, but they're not normally doing these things deliberately to hurt us. They're just people. So connection and unconditional positive regard. Those are two things that I think are very important. The next, and you mentioned this, communication.
Oh, that's the number. that's.
Well, I'm just saying it in the order that I remember.
Yeah.
Communication is crucial, and there's two parts to communication. I've heard it said, well, you got 2 ears and one mouth, so you should listen twice as much as you speak. I don't agree with that. If everybody was listening twice as much as they spoke, then nobody would be talking. Think about that. This is just a mathematical impossibility. The truth is, when you speak, you should be speaking from your heart and owning everything that you say. This is what I call first-person, self-responsible communication. You're taking responsibility and ownership of whatever is true for you. The other person is not responsible for how you feel, ever. The other person cannot make you do anything. I mean, all right, in extreme cases, yeah, they can probably use bizarre methods to force you into certain behaviors. But ultimately, if we're ordinary, loving human beings, then nobody can make you do anything, all right? So that's the first thing. So if you are feeling anger, then it's your anger for whatever it might be. If you're feeling love, it's your love, whatever it is. So that's communication. We've got to be honest and open about our communication. Now, the other side, on the listening side, to me, is presence. When I'm in relationship with somebody and I'm listening, I just want to be there and I hear what the other person has to say. And usually that can be accommodated by using active listening skills. That means I reflect back what I've heard. I may deepen the thing a little bit by saying, can you tell me more about this? But not trying to change the other person's mind by waiting for my opportunity to get it to jump in and change the topic.
Exactly.
So I think those three things, the connection, the intention, and the communication can really help build an ultimate relationship. And it doesn't have to be an ultimate sexual relationship either. It may be, but that's not a requirement. Why can't every relationship you have feature
an ultimate relationship?
Feature those ingredients. So really, it's up to you to choose to create the ultimate relationship wherever you go.
It's always about choice.
Right, and it's always about taking responsibility. I mean, you said it yourself. If my relationship is not working the way I want it to, it's 100% my responsibility. No, I may enroll my relationship partner, to help create a better relationship. Agreed. And that's ultimately what you want to do. But if it's not going to work out, it's not going to work out. It's time to move on.
Time to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. As sad as it might be. Yeah.
And maybe it's not time to move on. Maybe it's time to move around.
Move around
to a new way of showing up.
Yeah. Change a pattern. Get help. Get a coach.
Right. So this has been an awesome discussion.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
It's been, I think I
always love talking with you. We never know where we're going to end up.
I know. And I'm so glad that you were able to do it here today this show. Relationship is, in my view, one of the most important constructs, the most valuable constructs that we have available in our lives. In fact, without relationship, if just imagine if you were all alone and there was nothing to relate to, what would your life be like? I just
It
can't
wouldn't be
imagine
any
it.
fun.
I can't imagine it. I honestly, I can't. It's too difficult for my brain to even fathom. So the idea is we want to create relationships with people in such a way that they give us the best opportunity to really express and experience who we really are.
Mhm.
That's how I see it.
I agree. 1,000%.
1,000%.
1,000%.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great having you here. Remember, you can watch recordings of this show and all my other shows at my website at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. Also, I don't want you to forget about Marie's great book, The Romance Cookbook, that you can get on Amazon or on her website at mariesgold.com. As you go through your week, please remember the Life Mastery mantra. Gratefully forgive the imperfect being you have been in the past. Gratefully accept the magnificent being you are right now. And gratefully welcome the evolved being you are becoming in each new moment. Until we meet again, I am David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your journey. See you next time.
Bye. Bye.